Hello everyone, in this video we're going to go through the process of exporting vectors and rasters from ArcMap to Google Earth. Here I have a couple of layers already loaded inside of ArcMap. One is a vector contour layer and one is a raster hillshade map. Let's start with the vector layer first. To export data out from ArcMap, you can simply right-click on the layer, go under Data and then choose Export Data. If you're exporting vectors, then this is the window that you're going to see. Under the export field here, you have a couple of options. You can export either all of the features that are on this layer or just the features that are visible in your viewing extent. In this case, I want to export all of these contours, so I'm going to select the first option. Then we have three options for assigning a coordinate system to the output. We can either assign the same coordinate system that the layer already has inside of ArcMap, or we can borrow the coordinate system that our entire ArcMap project has and assign that to the output. And finally, there is an option that we can use if we want to assign the coordinate system that is within a database that we want to export the output to. This option is grayed out because I simply do not have a database that I want to export these features out to, so I have only one of these two options. In 99% of cases, I'm going to keep this to this layer's source data because I want to use the coordinate system that the layer already has. And finally, we have to choose a location that we want to export the files to. You can simply click on the folder icon in the far right, and then you can navigate to a folder on your hard drive that you want to save the files to. I'm going to choose this folder that I have here, and you can give a name to the output. I'm going to call these contours, and then you can choose to save them out as a shapefile. So from the drop-down menu here, simply choose shapefile. Now with that done, you can simply click on save and then press OK. The files will be exported and ArcMap will ask you if you want to import them back into the project as a map layer. In this case, I don't want to do that, so I'm going to click on no. Now I can open the folder that I exported the files to, and we can see that we have here a .shp file, which is the main shapefile, and then there are all of these other complementary files. Now, just like we've discussed already in other sessions, it is very important that you keep all of these files together in the same folder and never separate them, because they are dynamically referencing each other and all of the complementary files are carrying information about the main shapefile. If you separate these files, then Google Earth or other GIS applications are simply not going to be able to load the main shapefile. And now all that remains is for me to simply grab the main.shp file and drag and drop it in the Google Earth viewport. Google Earth is going to immediately ask us if we want to apply a style template to these features. If you simply want to import them quickly and you don't want to bother applying any colors or line styles to the features, then you can simply press on no. Otherwise, you can press on yes and you can apply a style template. We have already covered style templates in their own session, so if you're interested, please make sure to check that session out. For now, I'm going to press on no, and we can see the contours are going to appear under the list of places. I'm going to simply tick the visibility box to make them visible in the viewport. Now we can take a look at exporting out rasters. So I'm going to go back into ArcMap, and I'm going to hide the contour layer for now. Just as with vectors, to export a raster out of ArcMap, you can simply right-click on the layer and then go under Data and Export Data. When you're exporting rasters, this is the window that you're going to be presented with all of the export options. So let's break it down. Under the Extent section, you can choose the extent that you want to export to. In 99% of cases, I'll keep this to raster dataset, which is going to export everything that the layer currently contains. But if you want to export everything that you have inside of the viewport, then you can choose the data frame option. If you have selected any graphics inside of the viewport, then you can also choose the selected graphics option. In this case, it is grayed out for us because I have not selected any graphics inside of the data frame. So I'm going to bring this back to raster dataset. Under spatial reference, we have a couple of options for assigning a coordinate system to the output. If we keep this at raster dataset, it's simply going to pick up the same coordinate system that the layer already has. But if we want to assign the coordinate system that our project is using instead, then we can choose the data frame option. In most cases, I'm going to keep this at raster dataset. Then under the output raster section is where we can choose whether we want to export out the raw data of the raster or a rendered version of it. Now, by default, the raw data option is what is going to be enabled unless you tick the use renderer option. So if this box is not ticked, ArcMap is going to export the raster together with its raw data that is embedded into it. In this case, our raster does not actually contain any raw data because it's simply a map that was processed out from a digital elevation model that itself contained the raw data, such as elevation values. So if you are exporting out digital elevation models and those are intended to be used in GIS applications for analysis or map processing, you should always export out the raw data and not use the renderer option. In this case, it doesn't matter really which one of the two options we're going to use, but I'm going to use the use renderer option because it does make a slight difference when it comes to the size of the file. So if I tick the use renderer option, you will notice that it's going to limit the number of bands that we have in this raster to 3, which are the RGB channels, the red, green, and blue channels that make up the image. And it's also going to consequently reduce the file size a bit. So I'm going to tick the use renderer option, and we can see now the number of bands was reduced to 3 and the file size is a little bit smaller. Now, when you're exporting images out as rendered images, you should also keep the Force RGB option turned on. If you were to untick this box, then if you import the image into Google Earth or other applications, then it's most likely going to be displayed as completely black because it's not going to be able to recognize the RGB channels that make up the image. So I'm going to make sure that the Force RGB option is ticked on, which it is by default. If you want to export the image out as a perfect square, then you can tick the square box. Otherwise, you can also adjust the aspect ratio and resolution of the image from the criteria here that we have to the right side. For example, if I was working with an image that has a very high resolution and Google Earth is struggling to display it, I could come back here and under the raster size fields, I can specify a resolution that I want to limit the raster to. At the moment, our image is of a resolution of 2000 pixels wide, which is well below the threshold that Google Earth has, which is around 15 to 20,000 pixels wide. So I don't really have to do that, but if I want to, I can, let's say, reduce the resolution twice. The no data field does not really apply in instances when you're exporting images out to Google Earth because Google Earth does not have the capability to recognize no data values or isolate them in any way. But if you are exporting the image out for use in other GIS applications that have that capability, such as QGIS, then if your image has no data values, which are simply pixels that contain no data whatsoever, so they are either completely white or completely black, you can classify them as a certain value in this field, and then in your GIS application, you can reference that value and then tell the software to render those pixels as either fully transparent or something else. So this could be very useful in those cases, but in the case of Google Earth, this does not really apply, so you don't have to worry about it. Under location is where we specify the folder that we want to export the file to. You can click on the folder icon to the far right. Now, this is a little bit finicky. Make sure that you select the folder that you want to save the file to and don't go inside the folder itself. Otherwise, if you click on add, nothing is going to happen. And if you specify a name and then click on add, it's going to give you an error. So go one level up and then choose the folder that you want to save the file to and then click on add. And then under name is where we specify the name of the file. I'm going to call this Hillshade. And I also have to make sure that I specify the extension of the file format. In this case, we're going to be using GeoTIFF, which is what we're using 99% of the cases. So the extension for that is .tif. You can also select the file format that we want to use from the drop-down menu under Format. Again, in almost all cases, this will be GeoTIFF, but if for some reason your project requires another format, then you can choose one of those here. If your image is of a very high resolution and Google Earth is struggling to display it, besides reducing the resolution, what you might want to try first is to apply a compression to the image. So from the compression type drop-down menu, you have a few options. In almost all cases, I'm going to go for the JPEG compression, and then you're going to be able to specify the compression quality. Now, normally I'm going to go for something like 60 to 75, but if you can avoid compression or reducing the resolution altogether, then you should always choose that option because it does have an impact on the image quality. In this case, we're well below the threshold that Google Earth has, so I'm not going to bother applying any compression. And with that done, we can simply click on Save. The image will be exported, and ArcMap is going to ask us if we want to import it back into the project as a map layer. In this case, I don't want to do that, so I'm going to click on No. Now I'm going to go into the folder that I exported the file to, and we can see it here as hillshade.tif. Notice also that ArcMap created a complementary file called .tfw. This file carries information about the main .tif file, such as its position and rotation in the world. So just as with the shape files, these two files should always be kept together in the same folder because they're referencing each other. If you were to separate these two files from one another, then when you try to load the .tif file inside of Google Earth or other GIS applications, they are not going to be able to georeference it correctly, so it's not going to be positioned accurately in the world. Now from here I can simply grab the main file and drag and drop it inside of the Google Earth viewport. It's going to prompt us to choose one of these options before we can import the image. I have already covered what each of these options does in their own video under the importing raster sessions, so if you're interested, please make sure to check that session out. But in 99% of cases, you should choose the scale option. What Google Earth is going to do if you choose this option is it's going to evaluate the image, and if it's above its threshold of the resolution that it can comfortably display, it's going to scale the image down. But if the image is below that threshold, then it's not going to do anything, it's simply going to import it as it is. And in this case, our image is well below the threshold, so I'm just going to click on Scale, and the image will be imported. We can specify a name. I'm going to call this Hillshade, and then we can adjust the transparency from the transparency slider here. I'm just going to leave it at fully opaque for now, and I'm going to delete anything that we have under the description box. And with that done, I'm going to click on OK, and now the image has been imported and it should be overlain correctly. And with that done, this covers it for exporting vectors and rasters from ArcMap and importing them into Google Earth. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.